and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Shop Philosophy. As always, I'm your host, Killian, the news editor for the Being Libertarian family of publications and the managing editor for think-liberty.com. As always, you can follow us on all forms of social media. You can get your podcasts you can get our podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. I was going to say you can get your podcast where you get your podcast, which was an odd tautology that made no sense whatsoever. More to the point, though. You can follow me directly on Facebook by searching Killian Hobbs Author. And, of course, you can check back on our websites, think-liberty.com, beinglibertarian.com, and rationalstandard.com in order to get the daily updates on all of the different news, philosophy, economics, and all the other different topics that we cover there. Now, for today's episode, I wanted to discuss something that can be a little personal for some people, even though it's a topic that in general discussion we usually talk about in a very dispassionate way. We don't usually think of this in a specific humanistic way. We talk about the impacts that the topic has on people, but we don't necessarily talk about everything that's related to that. So what I want to talk about today is wealth. Now, I'll say this ahead of time, just in case anybody has any worries. No, I'm not about to go Tony Robbins on you and start telling you how you can unlock your potential and become a super millionaire inside of like 6 months by following these 3 easy steps. I'm not going to pull that crap on you. I'm going to ignore that aspect of the discussion entirely, except maybe later on to criticize that entire industry. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I might take this episode in a completely different direction and not do that at all. I think I will, though, just because of how impactful some of that stuff is. And anyway, I'll get to it if I get to it. But I want to talk about the concept of wealth. Now, as we know wealth, we think of wealth in the sense of the things we own. So what kind of assets we have. We think of how much money we have in the bank account versus how much debt we have. These are the sort of things that we measure our wealth by. But what if I suggested that we measure our wealth a little differently? One of the key metrics for wealth that I find generally gets ignored because it's not as easy to quantify. It's not as easy to put in a mathematical sense. But the concept of wealth in relation to the type of life you wish. Now, what I mean here is you've probably heard of the concept of minimalism before. I'm not going to go through the whole details of the ideology here. That would be a waste of time, but the concept is simple enough. It's, minimizing things, getting rid of what you don't need, and trying to live life more based on life than rather than the material possessions that you might have. I myself am by no means a minimalist, but in many ways I am. There's very few things that I purchase outside of maybe treating myself to dinner when I go out every once in a while, or the odd book that catches my eye that I feel like grabbing. But when it comes to things like buying myself, latest toys, or replacing a whole bunch of stuff that I've got in my house all the time, or updating all my tech and gear and gadgets and signing up for 20 different services I don't need, it's just not something that appeals to me. I'm what you could consider to be a bad consumer in that sense, because I don't really consume all that much. A lot of what I watch on streaming services that, I pay my small monthly subscription for, but I don't really go out to the movies or sign up for a whole bunch of special TV packages or anything like that. You could say that I'm minimalistic in that sense, but I wouldn't say that I'm a real minimalist. It's just that a lot of that stuff just doesn't have an appeal to me. It's not enough to make me say, that smartwatch is so cool, I have to hand over $400 for it right now. It's just not something that makes me desire it enough to make it worth the amount of time and labor and effort I put into earning the money that I earned in order to go do that, in order to acquire that thing. So when we're talking about wealth, we have to keep it relative to the person. So I wouldn't say that a person is exceptionally wealthy if we're talking about what they want and need versus what they have. What I mean here, and I should clarify a bit because that sounded like a pretty sloppy sentence, hearing it from myself 5 seconds later. What I mean is, if a person has a lot of desires for material things, or there's a lot of the stuff that they want to do in life, like travel, or maybe they've got an expensive hobby like RC can be like the radio control helicopters and stuff like that. If you're building them from scratch and you're really into that hobby, that can cost you several $1,000s a year to be part of that community, to build that stuff up and to do it really in depth, like a lot of people want to do. You could be really into tech and, you're spending thousands of dollars on servers and a bunch of extra computers and having a whole bunch of services to have separate networks set up for everything that you've got to pair everything off so that it's all closed off and away from each other. There's tons of different things that you could be passionate about or things that you want to experience or have as part of your life that cost money, because pretty much damn near everything costs money outside of small things like going for a walk and watching sunsets and all the other stuff that those meditation books tell you are supposed to be good for the soul, even though it usually just leads to blisters and you shouldn't stare directly at the sun anyway. All that aside, most of the stuff that people want to partake in or want to have as part of their lives involves money. Even something as wholesome as, say, visiting family. Visiting family isn't just, I'm going to go visit family. It can involve either a lot of gas or the cost of a plane ticket. If it's cross-country, then you need to get your passport done, and that costs money. There's your room and board fees while you're over there. Sure, you might be able to stay with the family, but that doesn't mean that all your meals are going to be covered, or, you're going to go and do the tourist stuff if it's a place that you don't usually frequent. So that's extra money that's going to be in your budget for that. And if people have these desires, and it's an aspect of life that they constantly find themselves needing to put money out for, then they could be better off than someone else as far as net income and the value of the property they own and different things like that. But we need to start looking at wealth through the lens of what fits the lifestyle and the person. Because there's a person like, say, myself. If I made maybe, keep in mind I know there's a lot of Americans that listen to this, so keep in mind this is Canadian currency, so call it about, I think a Canadian dollar is about 77 cents to your dollar, something like that. So when I frame things in numbers, I'm using Canadian numbers just to clarify that for people that haven't caught on through my accent and some of the things I reference that I'm Canadian. I don't say for sure and I don't say a boot, so it might be hard for some people to catch. I get that. What I was saying, though, is that when we're looking at wealth, we have to look at it from the person. So a person like myself, for example, I don't have a big interest in travel. It's not something that has really appealed to me. Like, I understand the importance of, and I do have a desire to broaden my horizons, but I find that there's so many things that I can learn of and so many things that I can involve myself in, even just where I am, that travel is something that should be either very purposeful or something that I might pursue down the road when I have either the extra wealth to put towards it or the extra time where I've semi-exhausted the resources around me, which if you actually go looking for resources around you, you'd be surprised how many are available for the things that you can learn and do and become involved in, pretty much regardless of where you live. So with that in mind, the costs of travel and things like that aren't really a big thing for me. Similar to concerts. There might be one or two concerts that pop up every once in a while that catch my eye and say, that's something I want to go to. But I'm not invested enough in the music scene to make myself say, I need to go to a concert like every 3 weeks or I'm going to lose my mind. I need to go out. I need to be a part of this. I have to have live music in my life, and constantly, spending the time, the effort, the energy, and the money to go and do those things. It's just it's not really a part of who I am as a person. So because of this, I could have, like I was saying, maybe an extra $10,000 a year, let's say, which, as far as net income divided over the course of an entire year, for some people that's a lot. For some people it's not all that much at all. For myself, it's kind of in the middle where it would be very helpful and it would help take care of a lot of things, but that wouldn't put me in all that large of a tax bracket. It would not make me a wealthy person to have that small amount of additional income versus how we usually measure median wealth or how we measure wealth in general. It would be a small jump up on the scale, but not enough to really shift that based on our current views of wealth. So because of this, and I know I said I wasn't going to go into this part, but I feel like I have to. When we see all of these bloody self-help books, they kind of get it and they kind of miss it. One of the things that you see in all these different either get-rich-quick schemes or turn your financial life around or whatever inane title they come up with, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books, all that stuff, those just get to me because they try to paint a picture that you can become super wealthy. And it's true, you can. People have the ability to do it. What they don't tell you is that you're not going to learn how to do it in one single book. There's people who, for a living, study economics. They get paid as economists. Now, using the United States modeling for it, the average economist makes about $70,000 a year. To be a professional economist, all they do is talk about money and wealth management, how our money works. You would think that people that do that professionally would almost automatically be millionaires, considering the fact that all they do and all they know and breathe is how money works and how to make it grow and move properly. But that's not the case. And the reason for that is that there's very few ways to truly become wealthy the way that we think of the word wealthy. We don't think of the word wealthy the way we should, which is, in my opinion, being able to cover issues as they arise and being able to take care of, the basic desires that you might have so long as you got a little bit of sense with money. That I consider to be wealthy. I would consider a person wealthy if their bills are covered, they can set it to automatic payment in their bank, and they don't have to actually worry about the amount that's coming in. It's just going to be covered. They don't have to worry about, if they're in a family, what's going to happen to their kids' education. They know between now and the time they're of age, there's just going to be enough in the account to deal with it. If a car breaks down, it's not something where you got to worry about how you're going to cover rent or how you're going to cover the mortgage because, you'll have enough to deal with it between now and next payday that you don't have to lose hair or go gray over the fact that you got to repair your car. It's things like that where if you just decide on a lark, you know what? I am going to go to the movie theater tonight because why not? I can. It's not something where you have to berate yourself afterwards for having that enjoyment because of, how much it costs to go to the theaters these days, which is an insane amount, all things considered. I blame Hollywood for a lot of that. They put almost too much into the movies now that could have been solved with just good acting and decent cinematography, that almost any movie that comes out now, they have to charge that kind of money for everyone along the line to make any real money on it, or even just recoup what they spent. That's a completely different topic for a completely different day. I'm not going to sidebar myself here. But when we look at wealth, we're always looking at the top end of the total dollar. And that frankly just does not reflect people's lives, because the whole purpose behind being wealthy is not just to obtain a specific mathematical marker. We shouldn't be looking at the concept of being wealthy through the lens of, hey, I hit this dollar bracket, I'm now wealthy. The dollar bracket doesn't mean anything unless we're addressing the things that we want in life and the things that we need in life. You can be under what's considered the poverty line in a country, but if your rent's covered, you're eating decently, and any of the normal wants that you might have are fulfilled, and you're not left wanting or thirsting or desiring anything extra, then that's perfectly fine. There's a lot of people I know that their idea of a perfect, say, Saturday night is sitting at home, PJs on, maybe a beer or a glass of wine or something like that, and just curl up watching TV. That's all they're doing. That's their big night. That's how they celebrate their, the week is done. I survived. I'm going to sit on my ass for 4 hours and do nothing. And that's how some people celebrate it. They don't want to, spend $50 to go out to a movie or pay for top-end tickets to go to a Broadway play or anything extravagant or extra like that. They got maybe an old 50-inch HD television, and they don't need to throw it out and get themselves a, 60-inch smart curved 4K display type television. It's not something that they have enough of a desire for, or something that they constitute as a need, or even just as worth it in general. They don't see the need for it, so it's not a detriment to their total happiness with their wealth to say that they can't afford, $2,000 for a top-end television. I mean, you can get a decent television that's considered in the top-end markers, usually for, at least again, Canadian currency, around maybe $800, $900. But then, of course, there's the top-end models that get into the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 range. But even the want there might not be as important to a person like this, even though their celebration is sitting down low-key, just relaxing and watching television. We see the same thing. I'll use computers as an example. I'm a big fan of technology. I love technology. There's things I'm wary about. I think we covered some of that in the last episode when I had Alon on. And I need to apologize for him. I kept calling him Alon when the name's supposed to be pronounced Alone. That's entirely on me for not having asked that before. Prior to the recording last week, I'd only actually looked at his name in writing, and it's spelled A-L-O-N. So my mistake on there, and a little forgiveness for that. I don't think anyone out there might have actually heard his name spoken before anyway, so I guess I'm not apologizing to you so much as I'm apologizing specifically to him. Back on loop. I don't know why I'm getting so sidetracked in this episode. I'm going to look back at the episode when I'm editing it, and I'm going to say, was I sleep deprived? Was I too many coffees or too few? Where was I on this? But that's aside the point. What I'm saying is that we need to step away from wealth as a number. That's the core point you can take away from what I'm saying. If we lock ourselves into setting our goals to specific financial numbers without any real value behind those numbers, then we're chasing empty dreams. When we look at the concept of wealth, we need to look at it based on what would fix things for us, what would put us in a comfortable position where money isn't a thing that we worry about. That's the place that we need to get. And anyone can say, I wouldn't worry about money if, I had a 14-room mansion and $10 million paycheck. Well, of course, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about where you need to be in order to be happy, and where you need to be to make sure that things are taken care of. And you can treat yourself every once in a while to the degree that you want to treat yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, some people might want to treat themselves by constantly going to concerts. Other people might treat themselves by wanting to travel and see the world when they're on vacation every year and go somewhere different and experience all these new and exciting things. Other people might treat themselves by perusing one of those random shop type stores like that one store, This Is Why I'm Broke, I think's the name of the website. And it's all just a whole bunch of random gadgets or unique products or spy gear that some people might just find cool and they feel like buying. Again, it's not bad to have wants, but what you consider wealthy, or what needs to be considered wealthy, is whatever is going to fulfill those wants realistically. And I say realistically because everyone's going to tell themselves, they'd love to have say a Maserati or something like that as their day car, maybe a Benz for the weekend, but that's not a realistic view of it. So the first step to making this mental transition when we look at wealth is to look at what are realistic things that we want. Travel is a realistic thing. There's people that have the ability, because of the way they've set things up, and they've done this specifically to achieve this goal of being able to travel, where, they might run a business and they work 6 months a year, and then they hand things over to other people for the 6 months that they're gone, and they just go and travel for 6 months because they've got the money to bounce between countries and take the planes or rent the cars or do any of the other stuff that's involved in that kind of bohemian lifestyle. They have that as what's going to make them happy. So having enough money to go do that, in their mind, is enough for them to be wealthy. Another example would be, I'll use the concert goer again. let's say, they want to go to a concert at least once a month, or, maybe go to that club every weekend where they have to pay the cover charge, go in, and there's a new live act every month or every week, just because it's the thing that they do there. Well, that means they're paying for a night out at the bar, plus cover, plus food, all that stuff, at least once a week. So in the course of a month, you're spending maybe $200-$300 when you add it all up, maybe even closer to $400, depending. And that kind of adds up over time. But if that's your entertainment and that's what's going to make you happy on top of having money to cover any of the other little problems that we usually consider to be setbacks, then you're in a good place. You can consider yourself wealthy if you don't have to worry about the potential of a setback, and you still have the money and the comfort in your money to be able to go out and do something that's going to either fulfill you or entertain you or make you enjoy life that little bit more. The first step to it, though, is being realistic. And this is the thing that, like I said earlier, pisses me off so much with the self-help books. The problem that I have so much with those self-help books that try to tell people how they're going to be wealthy is that they start off with a good idea. They ask you to have a realistic view of your money, and they also tell you to have realistic goals and then set greater goals and greater goals. But one or two of those books are not going to teach you the stock market. They're just not. They're not going to teach you how to actually make money on real estate or flipping houses. They're not going to teach you what you need to do in order to advance your career 2, 3, or 4 steps to get the raises necessary to really bump up your total income. They're not going to teach you how to properly and successfully manage a business end to end if you decide to start a secondary business to supplement your income to get you to that point. Those books don't teach you any of that stuff. What they teach you instead is certain things like how to look at money or decision making when you're buying something or other things that realistically they can be helpful, but they get so close to the point and then miss it drastically that I can only think of them as a failure. They get close to the point by telling people to be precise with their money, to be on top of their money, to keep it top of mind, and to think it through and always look for opportunities to increase your wealth in that sense. And then they veer way off course with a whole bunch of random assorted pieces of information about their 1 in a million trek towards being wealthy, which if anyone tried to emulate it, it would be maybe 1 in a million that might actually be able to follow in the footsteps of one of these people. We see this and they miss that last key step in the concept of how we view wealth, which is that oh so truly human element to it. They miss the person because they're still bound by the concept of wealth in numeric detail. So with that all said, the numerics are important. I know I've spent the majority of the episode talking about how they shouldn't be our focus. They are important. And there's things you can do to manage that. You can, on pretty much every bank, you can download a list of your transactions and do a quick little spreadsheet. Usually takes maybe, when I do my roundups on my finances, it takes me 15, 20 minutes to go through and break down everything that I purchased, where I got it from, where it's going, what I'm spending my money on, where I could save my money, and then using that knowledge to kind of change my spending habits a little bit to say, oh crap, I'm spending, $40, $50 on coffee more than I thought I was. Okay, so I don't really need the, let's say the 6 p.m. coffee. I drink coffee pretty late. I might even have a coffee after I'm done recording this because it's just water to me at this point, but I love the taste. Except for the morning coffee. That makes me a functional human being. I'm not an addict. Anyway. And I look again at the title of the show. Anyway, moving along. I could take that one coffee, pull it out, and then all of a sudden I'm down that much that I was spending per month. And I can make small little tweaks like that to my overall budgeting just by being on top of that number and understanding that number. But like I mentioned in a previous episode, I quoted another one of these people that writes the self-help books. I quoted Jordan Belfort, where he talks about the 4 steps to success. The first one being vision. The only reason that I track the numbers is so that I can have the visual of what's going on. That way, to reach the vision that I have of where I want my wealth to be, because I don't want or really see myself ever being one of those multimillionaire types. And I don't mind that. I don't need to be the guy that owns the factory, so to speak, in order to be happy about it. As long as I can take care of everything, I don't have to worry about the little surprises, and I got enough money left over to entertain myself the way I like to entertain myself, I'm perfectly a happy guy. That all said, I track the numbers so that I know where I'm at, and so I know that what little tweaks I can make to do what I need to do to get there. That's the only time or point we should really be worrying about the numerical aspect of wealth management. Now, if we want to have a very well-off life, so to speak, where we're practically tripping over money, we don't have to worry about it, then at that point, we don't need to be thinking about the wealth itself. We need to be thinking about, where are we taking our careers? What are the things we know? Where can we make money? And how do we get involved in learning about it? Like I mentioned, real estate, stock markets. The career advancement, of course, is the more common route, but that's another option. Starting our own businesses. Those are things that can actually generate wealth for us and then we can work towards. And if we have a passion for something or something that really catches our eye and we want to move in on it, then we can do that. But if we're talking about the average person that's not about to go get a realty license and go through that whole process of learning that industry inside and out, or trying to track the stock market every single day and pay attention to the 30 different businesses that are in their portfolio and any news related to those industries that could possibly affect the ups and downs of their portfolio. Considering the average person is not someone who's going to go through all of that, I'd recommend the simple stuff. Work on a budget, stick to it, see what you can shave, come up with, one of the 1,000 tricks that are available to kind of stop yourself from spending too quickly. If it's a item that you don't need, but something you want, then hold off a couple days before you purchase it to make sure that it's something that you actually wanted and you weren't just caught up in the moment. You can do little things like break down for repetitive items like coffee or eating out or whatever else. You can break down how many times you do it and see what days or what times you might be able to shave one of those purchases off and then not worry about it. And that'll slowly get you a little extra money. And it's that little bit extra that gets you towards not having to worry. And if we're going to talk about someone being wealthy, the wealthiest person is the person that doesn't have to worry about their wealth. It doesn't matter how much actual currency is tied to that wealth, but I would say the wealthiest person is the person that doesn't have to worry about it at all. So I will thank you for taking the time out of your day or morning or afternoon or evening or maybe a few days later, whenever you decided to listen to this. Maybe you're one of the people, a year down the road who happens to stumble across this podcast and you decided to download all the old episodes and work your way through. However you came across the episode and whatever time of day, week, month, or year you're listening to this, thank you for joining me. As always, you can follow us on all forms of social media, as I mentioned. You can follow me directly on Facebook by searching Killian Hobbs Author. You can listen to our podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. Visit our websites and hit the little subscribe bell. So that way you get the daily updates on all the articles that come out, such as My Bad Arguments articles that come out every single Wednesday. And I think that's about everything I need to plug here. So, as always, if you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, I'll see you again next week.